Hi, my name is Josh Hester, and today we're going to talk about fearing God, His judgment, and what it means to worship Him in spirit and truth. Many times in the Bible, we hear that we need to fear God, and we wonder what that means. But I found a beautiful text that helps us understand. In fact, if we look at our Bibles, in the book of Proverbs, it says this: "The fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride, and arrogancy, and the evil way." You see, biblically speaking, to fear God is not just an emotional response. To fear God, partially, means to be against the things that are against Him. Now, of course, you've also heard of the normal definition of fear of the Lord, which is basically to have awe for Him, to think of Him in amazing ways, which is true. But it's important to realize that fearing God is not just to have awe for God, but it's also to do what Proverbs 8:13 says: to hate evil, to hate destruction, to hate arrogancy, and to hate pride. So in Revelation chapter 14, it says this: "Fear God and give Him glory." So when we know that fear God means first, yes, to have awe for Him, to think of Him as amazing, and second, to hate all of those arrogant, destructive things that are against Him, it's in that moment that we can truly fear God, giving Him awe in our hearts and being against those things that hurt Him and His people. But the Bible goes on, it says, "Fear God and give Him glory because the hour of His judgment has come." Now, there's a lot of theology about the judgment of God, but I want to bring one point out for you. Often we think of judgment as bad. We think we're being judged or we're being criticized. But I want you to imagine a woman who has recently been raped. Or maybe you think of a child who has been abused. Or perhaps you think of all of the suffering in this world that has destroyed thousands of lives. It's in this context that the judgment of the Lord becomes beautiful. You see, the judgment of the Lord is when God stands up and He makes a decision as to what is right and to what is wrong in this world. And part of that judgment is not only making that decision, but putting out punishment and rewards based on what people have done. Therefore, with the judgment of the Lord is where we find justice for that woman who was raped, for that child who was abused, for all of the suffering in this world that you and I have experienced. God's judgment coming is the good news that justice will be served. But the Bible goes on, it says, "Fear God and give Him glory because the hour of His judgment has come." And then it says, "Worship Him who made the heaven and the earth and the sea and the springs of waters." You see, once we've seen the awe of God, we've stood against those things that are destructive, and we've looked forward to the judgment of God that brings justice on this world, we do another thing. In the Bible, oftentimes when people worship, you find men throwing themselves prostrate on the ground. Or maybe you see David dancing before God for joy of what he's done. Every time we see worship in the Bible, we see someone giving of themselves, whether it's through sacrifice of an animal, whether it's through singing songs, whether it's through throwing themselves before God, worshiping Him because of how great He is. Worship is always an emotional response where I give myself to God. And here in Revelation 14, we see the main reason why we would worship God. It says this: "Worship Him who made the heaven and the earth, the sea, and the springs of waters." You see, we worship God because He's the one who made us, because He's the only one who's worthy. So, fear God and give Him glory because the hour of His judgment has come, and worship Him who made the heavens and the seas and the springs of water, because He's the one who's worthy. So in this world, God's message for us today is not only that we should fear Him and give Him worship and glory and honor, but that His judgment is coming, that He has a plan to make all things right, and the suffering of this world will not go on forever. Amen.